picture?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Rav Gedalia, for those wonderful words. A truly wonderful award. About 25 years ago, I heard the following word in Torah V'Daas from Harav Moshe Sher Zatzal. For those of you who remember, Rabbi Sher used to give a homiletics class, a public speaking class in the yeshiva, once a week for a few weeks a year, and he gave it apparently for many, many years. The format of the class, for those of you who may remember, Rabbi Sher would say a vort, and he would ask you to apply as best you could. This is what he said. There's a well-known chazal, it's a Gemara in Psochim. The Gemara says, Omer Rabbi Yosef, Ilav da ha'yoyme da atzeres de kogorim, if it weren't for this day of Atzeres, the Yontiv of Shvuas, the Yontiv of Kabbalah HaTorah, Kama Yosef Ike Beshuke. There are lots of Yosefs in the street. Understood simply, and the way Rashi explains it, what Rav Yosef was saying was what distinguished me from my chaverim and from others was the Torah that I absorbed, the Torah that I learned. If it weren't for this Torah, Kama Yosef Ike Beshuka, go in the street and you'll see there are other people named Yosef. I would be no different. I would be, as it were, just another Joe. Said Rabbi Scherer, B'Shem and Odom Godel, there's a much deeper thought here. He explained that a Yid without Torah lacks spiritual balance. He's torn apart by conflicting drives. He is, and these were Rabbi Scherer's words, because these are my notes from about 20 years ago. He is a spiritual schizophrenic. He develops a split personality. He says, a Yid with Torah, the Torah that you are learning here in the yeshiva in Torah V'Daas, and the way it's taught in Torah V'Daas, will give you a centrality of purpose, a centrality of mind, a centrality of thought, a stability and a consistency. And what Rabbi Yosef was saying was, Ilav hayoyme datzeres, if it weren't for the Torah, Rabbi Yosef was speaking about himself. Kama Yosef Ike Beshuka, he would be split in so many different directions. He would be so many different people depending on where he was. Kama Yosef Ike Beshuka, me. And then he turned to us. There was a small crowd. This was in the Besmedrash Cotton. And he said, how would you apply this vort? And I remember I was, 18, 19, 20 years old, and I had no clue. I had no clue. I didn't really understand the vort at the time. 25 years later, I think I can apply the vort, and I think I can even use it in a speech, if you permit me. Because I think the key to the vort was the word beshuke. Beshuke. You know, many of the graduates of 78, some of whom you'll meet tonight, became yeshiva, became Magid Shir Mesiftis in the greatest yeshivas in our communities, became rabbonim of shuls, became yeshiva administrators. But many of us found ourselves outside the Koisle HaYeshiva, found ourselves outside the walls and the protection of the frum community. we found ourselves beshuke in the marketplace, whether it was on Main Street or on Wall Street. We found ourselves beshuke. And I must tell you, many of us, certainly myself, we encountered a culture shock. I didn't think it was going to be such a culture shock, but it was a culture shock. We found ourselves dealing all day and sometimes late into the night with people who, it turns out, while they looked very intelligent, very proper, they had completely different value systems, And how easy it would become to be influenced. Many of us found ourselves where we were the only Shema Torah mitzvahs in a firm of 300 or 500 or more. And how easy it is to have your standards lowered, to make a chas v'shalom, nicht gefährlich, but a slight adjustment and accommodation. Somehow we would start to look like a different person. I remember there was one nicer with me where I had to be in Nashville, Tennessee for some transaction, and the senior partner at the firm that I was trying to make a name at, he wanted me to stay later for this meeting, and it was going to be Erev Shavuos. So I have to tell him this whole Maisa. So I remember I called him up. He was in Baltimore, I was in New York, and I called him up and I explained to him I can't attend this meeting. And I could hear from his voice, he was completely perplexed. And I explained to him exactly what goes on, and I cannot attend this meeting. And he told me, Mr. Weiss, in my 35 plus years at this firm, I don't believe we have had anybody here with your practices. The lesson of Torah V'Daas was there can never be any steers. There can never be any contradictions, no inconsistencies. You can't have a Yid shuckling by Shachris, and maybe before Shachris coming from a Daf Yomi shir, and then he finds himself in his business, and his business associates, his business counterparts, know that he is a religious Jew. They can't, it can't be. This cannot be the same person who was davening Shachris. It can't be. The lesson of Torah V'Daas, and especially the lesson of Harav Pam, Zeichet Tzadik Levrocha, was that the Ehrlichkeit, the Tmimiskeit, the Ernstkeit that you had in the yeshiva classroom has to be extended to a corporate boardroom, to a negotiating room, a courtroom, whatever room you find yourself in, you are beshuka. You can't have any spiritual or ethical schizophrenia. You can't have kama yosefike beshuka. Someone once said, education is what you retain after you've forgotten everything that you learned. Hopefully I and the other graduates remember much of what we learned. But what was ingrained, certainly in many of us, was this concept of there can't be a kama yosef ike beshuke. And for this lesson, if for nothing else, I'm eternally grateful for all the Rebbeim, for all the teachers, all the people who were involved in Torah V'Daas who set this tone. And in closing, I would just like to thank my family and dear friends who have come to be with my wife and myself, my wife Judy, tonight for this truly special day. We're very, very humbled by this. I'd like to thank especially, I'm grateful that my mother is able to be here. And I would be remiss in not mentioning my father, Oliver Shalom, who frankly, were he here tonight, would probably be the proudest person in this room. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for supporting the issue.